process in life that when the people you love the most love you back, that's as close to heaven we can get on this side. So that was about the Watts household.
Okay, that's beautiful.
Beautiful.
I'm going to respond to the ground. I'll tell a little story. You know, I've been pastoring the same church 26 years. I've been associated with Grace Bible Church for 36 years, my entire ministry. I'm a son of grace. And so I came in one Sunday, and I'd been with my children on Wednesday night, and I asked them a simple question: what was the title of my sermon? And I was amazed. These kids, elementary school, a few junior high, they all remembered the title of my sermon. And then I asked them, I said, well, what illustration did I use? And they told me the illustration verbatim I used to illustrate my sermon. I said, well, what part of the Bible was I in? And they told me. I was so excited. So I came to church next Sunday morning, and I stood in the pulpit, and I said, will everyone who can remember the title of my sermon last week raise your hand? Not a single adult raised their hand. Not one of them remembered. I said, can anybody let me know what exactly was my main point? Nobody raised their hand, right? So here's what I'm saying. Brother John Shabazz is an honorary member of my church forever because he laid out, right, marvelous economy of words, everything I talked about last week. And I'm just incredibly impressed with that and appreciate the attentiveness that he was given during our conversation. The one thing I will add just quickly before we get into some dialogue back and forth is what we were trying to do with the Hope 2020. We actually were trying to create a statewide template. And so there are actually 220 census tracts in West Virginia that have poverty rates 20% or higher. There's a total of 480 census tracts, 20%, but 220 of those census tracts have poverty rates 20% or higher. So what we were attempting to do was say, what if we were to take 20% of the 1.25 billion, which is $250 million, and then allocate it across those 220 census tracts. So each census tract would have gotten over $1 million. And those census tracts would butt up against each other, like on the west side, your census tract 1, 7, and 8, that make us call the West Side Flats, and that's from North Charleston all the way down to Elk River. Well, those census tracts would have gotten over $3 million. And then they could have been invested in those census tracts. So that's what we were trying to do. We thought we could create the model of the template here. We want to create a funding pool, for the whole state. So all these distressed areas could have gotten some funding. And we still think that is an idea that we should be pushing for with the legislature. That money be set aside and to create what we call, they could call it the Economic Justice and Equity Fund to invest in these distressed census tracts. And because African Americans live in large concentration in census tracts, they got poverty rates well above 20%. Then money would come to those tracts, and nonprofits and small businesses could have an opportunity to get some of those resources to rebuild the community. So that's what we were trying to do with the Hope 2020 Economic Justice and Equity Fund. And the other point I'll just touch on lightly, then I'll let you guys kind of bounce some things back on. When I was talking about the private sector, and I was in a conversation earlier today, I try to remind people that the wealth of the United States of America, it is in the private sector. It is in these major private corporations. It is in private individuals who will disproportionate percentage of the income. It is in these large private foundations. That's what the real wealth of this nation is. So I really felt that when COVID-19 hit and things were shutting down and these pro sports franchises were debating whether they were going to open, and then the Georgia Floyd and Breonna Taylor murders, then created this backdrop to have this conversation about racism, about justice. And I really felt like that we had this nation a place we've never had it in before and may never have it in again. And that is the pro sports, the billions and billions of dollars that flowed into pro sports. They were going to play by hook or by crook. And so when Roger Goodell immediately threw up $200 million. The NFL was going to put up $200 million to help to do some things around racial justice. This is the man that vilified Colin Kaepernick. And now Odell was saying, Black Lives Matters, right? And then when the NBA threw in 300 million, okay, and then when the makers of Aunt Your Mama's Pancake Syrup and Big Ben Rice, I want to pull the. I knew we had this nation, and what I was trying to suggest that if LeBron James is could use their leverage, they could have negotiated $1 billion into an economic justice fund from the NBA. Same thing could happen to the NFL. They could have went to all of these major sponsors, and that's who wants these games to be played because they want to continue to market their stuff at the American public. They could have went to the NCAA. Now here, the NCAA said that if schools were counseled, they wouldn't have no. So they send the kids home. They said that we're gonna play these football games. We have the championship play, and we're gonna play the NCAA schedule. All of this stuff has been leveraged to say, wait a minute, if you don't set money aside, the players said we're not gonna play. And I'm telling you, we could have created an economic justice and equity fund for the whole United States of America. But unfortunately, we allowed ourselves to be pressured, and I think even President Barack Obama, he weighed in and encouraged them to play. But they had a negotiating position that's the strongest that maybe African Americans have had, maybe in the history of the nation. They could have negotiated billions of dollars to be set aside from the private sector, and then once the new administration gets in Washington, they could have chance to see that that's the level of thinking I'm trying to get people to kind of realize is that they asked one of those bank robbers, they asked them why they rob banks, right? And they said because that's where the money is. And so we got to look, where is the money? The government is taking out, right? And the government is giving these corporations all these big tax breaks and these rich people these tax breaks, so they got our money, these rich folks and these rich corporations. And then we go keep begging to the government, and they keep saying, well, we ain't got no money, and we broke, and we can break off a little bit of this. Where at the same time, they're passing all these breaks and all these loopholes to these private companies. And that's what's going on. That's the point that I was trying to make the last time. And
yes, sir.
Maybe at some point, future this could happen, but we could use it as a model, even locally in the state. Right, to start talking about corporations and saying we need you to set up money and reinvest. That's the thought that I was trying to lay out, Brother John.
Well, I actually believe it or not, being here in Morgantown, West Virginia, I actually had a thought some time ago that I hear some feedback, and I don't think that's me. I hear something going on in the background there, but I was thinking for some time that the university should, do work in our growth and development, appropriate certain resources, a certain amount of resources out of their annual budget, and not just them, but others too. Other corporations and so forth. We have examples of that. I think, say Georgetown, where Georgetown did something specifically, but it was connected to slavery reparations. However, I think the Disparities Report and the slavery reparations thing are well connected with one another, extensions of one another. I don't know what position you would take on that, or either one of you would take on that, but.
Well, I'll jump in, John, and share.
Go ahead.
I think it's connected. Can you all hear me okay? Because I put my headphones on. So here's something I'm grateful for, and some good news, and I think I'm really happy that my kids kind of keep me up to date with technology. I'm kind of spoiled in that regard. My oldest son, Miles, is in technology, but he also got me into this app that's a beta. So it's a social media app, and it's called Clubhouse. Okay, and so if you do your Googles on Clubhouse, it's sort of this, it has become a very black space, and you have to be invited in. So, I'm not the cool kid. Miles is the cool kid that kind of got his mom in. And it's a place where you're able to have conversations like we're having. But, for instance, this week, people that are in the app are like TD Jakes or Henry Louis Gates, just because, they're our fellow West Virginians, and also, journalists, political leaders, and you're able to just have one-on-one conversation in these rooms. They call them clubs. And so I'm super excited to be in there and really finding that, our West Virginia Black political issues have, people are interested in them. We just don't necessarily have a bridge into them. So, I'm kind of, in this space, which is, you got to understand, Clubhouse is going to be, mark my words, it's the next Facebook, it's the next Twitter, it's the next Instagram, right? And so it's in beta, which means, they're testing it out, and I'm part of the people testing it. And, it will open up soon. It could change. But for right now, I'm using it for what it's worth. And I had an opportunity to have a conversation and sit as a moderator with Leo Smith. And Leo Smith is a former Republican, a Black Republican. You can give him a Google. He's got some weight behind his name. Pastor Watts, he was one of the thought leaders behind Americans for Prosperity. And it's worked on, all the big campaigns and whatnot as a Black Republican. He's since, he has some word for, he's not a Black Republican anymore. He's an independent, but I learned so much from this conversation about reparations, and that there is truly, a movement, that this is not a far-fetched concept, and how that's moving. But also, the thing that Leo talked about that was connecting back to the private sector, and this is, when he's speaking from a national perspective, and I'm trying to make it make sense, in our West Virginia world. But the one thing that he mentioned that I thought maybe we could give some thought to, or Pastor Watts, you could think about how this connects to state policy, and that is that there are no Black PACs. There are no 501c4 organizations that can support policy or support candidates in West Virginia. I mean, I've never heard of them. I've never heard of or maybe you have, that have tapped into sort of a national PAC that supports Black issues, where we can actually have, momentum, but the messaging. And I think that's what's really missing in a lot of our work, because I'm trying to connect the dots, and I was a little frustrated earlier today because I can see from where I sit all the people doing things, right? And how disconnected they are from each other. And I think it's literally, from my marketing mind, a bit of a messaging. And that's why I'm trying to create, this platform through Black by God where people can come and get information. You don't have to agree with the information, but at least it's in one